back as we fill your mind with spooky true crime stories of the deranged, unhinged, and absolute pure evil murders that will blow your mind. Some places we will visit to show you around and educate you on the history. Other times we will bring you to the paranormal because the dead never lie silent for too long.
Be the last time anybody sees us alive. I don't know where she has us, but we're gonna get fucking killed.
Hello? Gina, there is a beehive over there. Do you see that in the hole?
Buckle up, Buttercup.
Welcome to 50 States of Madness.
Welcome to 50 States of Madness.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hello. Hi, how are you? You
Good.
feel so far away.
I am so far away. By the way, I'm Shannon.
I'm Gina.
I'm in Texas right now, so that's why we have to Zoom our episode today with each
Yeah.
other. I am not in the same state as Gina as we speak because I'm visiting my daughter. So
Yeah, usually she's sitting right across the way from me.
yeah. Oh, don't let this stack of bookshelves behind you fool you. It's not the
Sorry,
same
she's
as
doing
at the
late night
library.
studying at the library.
Yeah. Yeah.
But before we start, I wanted to address a comment that we got on YouTube.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
we had somebody ask if I could say buckle up, Buttercup.
You did used to say that. You used to say that, buckle up, Buttercup, and
I
you
know. I don't know why it's I
side.
know. I know. I don't know. So
It was kind of gonna be our thing, like, oh, it's gonna be on our merch. I totally love it, and I don't know why we let it go.
I know because I do say it a lot.
You
Not
do.
on the episodes, but I do say it a lot. That's obviously how it came to light. But
Yes.
yeah, so this is for Loretta. Buckle up, Buttercup.
You know what? Especially on this episode, this one's a doozy. We normally would have recorded this episode before I left, but
Yeah.
because it was so intense and so much information, Gina was like, we're going to have to do this while you're in Texas because I am not ready. So
Yeah.
what?
And I don't still feel like I'm 100% prepared because there's quite a few things out there. There's a lot of podcasts and stuff. There's a book that we're going to refer to that I didn't have a chance to read. So there's like a lot of stuff out there that I want to get my hands on because I've heard of this story, and we're going to be talking about Maura Murray today. And I've kind of followed this story a little bit off and on throughout the years, but I've never done I've never read and like really taken a deep dive on all of the theories and all of the things that people say could have happened or whatever. There is so much to this that I feel like this is going to be a long episode, but we're barely going to touch the surface.
Yeah. Me, on the other hand, had never heard of it. And I kind of put my glasses up here because I have a really strong reflection and I can't see a thing when I put it up
Yeah,
there.
sorry. I have my iPad over here, and so it's reflecting in my glasses and it looks all funky. So if you're watching this on YouTube, my apologies, but
yes. But so I had never heard of this case. Not even, this is one of them. I was not familiar with it at all. In fact, when Gina called me and said, hey, I got this case, I was thinking of a completely different one she was talking about. And so I started asking, like, kind of talking about the other case I thought we were going to touch on. And she's like, wait a second. Wait, who are you talking about? You know?
well, you had said something about them finding her body, and I'm like,
Yeah. You're
they
like,
never
wait a
did.
second, we're
No
not talking
body.
about the same one. So this one was new for me, and I watched the show that you recommended, but then again, like you said, I haven't touched on the book, but this one was really interesting, and I'm surprised that more people don't know about it. It's one of those that
It's out there. It's pretty well known. I think it's a pretty well-known case, but I think the reason that it's kind of coming back up now is because it's the 20-year anniversary of her disappearance.
okay.
Just like 5 days ago. It was 20 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's an older case, but
Huge mystery on what happened
it's
to
a
her.
huge
There's a
mystery.
there's a lot of different theories on it. I mean, which we think for every missing person, it's always, did they go on their own? Are they murdered? Are they still out
Very
there? What
common.
happened to them? Like you kind of go through it, but I was really surprised on the statistics that they were saying there's 70,000 women out there
Missing.
that have gone missing that we do not know in the United States, that we do not
Yeah.
know what happened to them. That's terrifying.
Yeah, it's when you think about it, I mean, that's a huge number. But the
Yeah.
thing that just, I don't want to say fascinates me, but just is so odd to me is just the fact that somebody can just go missing, like literally within, because the time frame that she disappeared in was so small from when the last time she was seen until she wasn't seen, is a very small window.
Yes. With a
And
lot of
it's,
witnesses.
yeah, it's just, it's
Yeah.
very fascinating how, and I guess when you think about how quickly things could happen, and when you're in the moment, how you don't know like exactly what's happening, like, oh my God, this is going to turn into a big mystery. Like, you're probably not paying attention like you would if you knew, like, okay, I need to watch every single, like, you don't think that you're just going to drive by a car that's crashed and the person in it is going to disappear. Like, you don't think that those things are going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think that if again, like they say, hindsight's 2020. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, so the girl that we're talking about today, her name is Maura Murray. She was born on May 4th, 1982, and she was the fourth child to Fred and Lori Murray. She had an older brother, Fred. She had two sisters, Kathleen and Julie, and then she had a younger half brother named Kurt. When she was 6 years old, her parents divorced, after which Maura lived primarily with her mother. She was very smart. She was a very smart girl. She was, I believe, accepted to Harvard. She went
West
to West
Point.
Point for a little
That's
while.
already right there. Like, that
Yeah.
that's a tough school to get into.
Yeah, she
And it
was,
wasn't only her, it was her older sister that also attended West Point. So
yes,
just the family in general, very
yes,
disciplined and very smart.
yes. And so she ends up in a nursing program at the University of Massachusetts. And we'll find out later how that whole thing transpired and why she went from West Point to the university. So, so first I just want to briefly just touch on like the incident and what happened, and then I want to go through like all of the theories. So Shannon and I watched a show on Oxygen called The Disappearance of Maura Murray, and I know that there's a few shows out there, there's a bunch of podcasts out there, but basically this show was with an investigative journalist. Her name was Maggie, hold on, I wrote it down. Maggie Freeling, and then Art Roderick, who's a retired US Marshal. And they basically worked together to work through all these theories of interviewing people. They interview these two guys, Tim and Lance, and they're hosts of a podcast called Missing Maura Murray. And with
Like
them,
they do like the retracing of the steps.
they do
It actually
everything.
takes you through everything. Yeah, it's actually really well done.
Yeah, they go back and visit the crash site. They interview her father, because we'll find out later that her mother passed 5 years after Maura went missing. They interview, pardon me, they interview friends, they interview a bunch of people. And I feel like when I was watching it, I was almost like, okay, like they can't find anything more. And then bam, the next episode, it's like, oh my God, something else.
Yes.
So, so she was a very, very, very smart girl. And so what basically happened is her dad had come to her on February 7th in Amherst, and they were gonna go car shopping because her car that she was actually driving during, like, when she disappeared. I don't want to say abducted. When she disappeared,
Yeah, because we really don't know what
you
happened to
don't
her.
know. It was a black Saturn. And apparently it was like on its last leg and smoking. And he was worried about, her getting stranded somewhere, getting pulled over. So he went to her and they were going to go car shopping. So he arrives there to go car shopping. Then after car shopping, they didn't buy a car, but they just went looking. They had dinner with they went out to dinner, and I believe when they were at dinner, they met up or saw a friend of hers. And then at approximately 10:30, she drops her dad off at his motel and she borrowed his car. Goes back to the university for a dorm party. So she's at this party. She leaves the party around 2:30 on Sunday, February 8th to drive back to her dad's motel. At 3:30, while she's driving, she hits a guardrail and does a lot of damage on her dad's car. About
And
$10,000
yeah,
worth of
it's a
damage.
brand new truck. Like
So
I think for them, right, it was a brand new truck for their family, and they weren't a family with a lot of means or a lot of money.
no,
So
they didn't. They didn't. And I think that her
and
dad was initially probably pretty upset.
yeah.
But they had, I guess, called and whatever, it was going to be covered by insurance. But what he asked her to do was to go by the Department of Motor Vehicles and to pick up accident forms for an accident report that I guess she had to fill out. And so during this accident report, when the police came, there was no record of her having a field sobriety test done. So we don't know if she was drinking and driving. We don't know at this point, whatever the case may be. So she drives to her dad's motel. And then later on that morning, her and her dad rent a car. And he leaves for Connecticut. So 11 o'clock Sunday night, he calls her to remind her to pick up a blank copy from motor vehicles of this accident report. And they agreed that they would talk the following day on Monday and discuss filling out all of this paperwork. And that's kind of how it was left. So in the very early hours of February 9th, Maura used her computer to search MapQuest for directions to the Berkshires and to Burlington, Vermont. Now they're in New Hampshire she's there in New Hampshire. So around 1 o'clock, she emails her boyfriend saying that she's sorry that she hasn't called, that she didn't feel like talking to anyone, and that she would call him later. That was basically the only thing that she said. Then she makes a call and she inquires about renting a condo in Bartlett, New Hampshire. And that is a place where her family has vacationed before.
I guess they had a lot of memories about going up there with the family, hiking.
Yeah. That was, that I guess that was like somewhere familiar to her, maybe.
Yeah, sentimental.
Right. So at 1:24, she emails, this is kind of where things kind of start to take a little bit of a weird turn. So at 1:24, she emails a work supervisor saying that due to a death in the family, that she would be out of town for a week and that she would contact them when she was going to return. According to family, there was not a death in the family.
Yeah, and that's weird because so she basically lied, right?
Right.
When she emailed, I think was it just the work supervisor or was her school as well, right? Like her classes, her professors, everyone, like
Right.
she was telling like even friends, like, oh, she had to leave on a
There was
family emergency. Yeah.
emergency, yeah, that there was a death. So at 2:05, she calls a number with recorded information on booking a hotel in Stowe, Vermont. And this is just not, she's not talking to a live operator. This is just a recording. Then at 2:18, she calls her boyfriend and leaves a message and just saying that she'll talk to him later. So at 3:40, she goes to an ATM. She withdraws $280, which I believe was all the money that she had in her bank
That's
account.
insane. Yeah.
She takes everything out. She goes to a liquor store where she purchases Bailey's Irish Cream, Kahlua, vodka, and a box of red wine. And that totaled $40.
So
So the
only
camera,
having, that's funny because you're thinking like only having $280, that's all your money, and you spend 40 of it just
$40 on alcohol.
alone. Yeah.
Yeah. So the cameras in the area show that she was by herself. Apparently, there were cameras there around the liquor store, the store that she went to. She was by herself. And so she had also at some point during the day gone to motor vehicles and picked up those accident reports for her father, which he had asked her to, because we'll later find that those were found in her car.
Okay.
So at 4:37, she calls her voicemail to check her messages, and that was the last recorded use of her cell phone, was at 4:37 p.m. That was it. That was the last time that her phone was used.
I'm listening to this because I know there was some theory that she took off and on her own and she wasn't going to return. But as you're listening to this, it seems like she was cleaning up, like she was still planning on returning if she's still getting the motor vehicle paperwork. You
Right. No,
like,
yeah, no. I mean,
yeah,
everything, well, because at some point she actually turns in her homework. Like she's finishing up her homework assignment and she's turning her homework in. So I feel like if this was, because when we get a little further ahead, one of the theories is that she is that she has moved to like start a new life, basically.
yeah.
And so I feel like if she was, I mean, I don't know, if I was going to pack up and move somewhere and start a new life, I wouldn't worry about doing my homework and turning it in, because at that point, it's not going to matter.
I wouldn't have picked up the motor vehicle paperwork.
No,
Yeah.
because none of that's going to matter.
I wouldn't have bothered emailing anybody, letting them know, like, hey,
Yeah, you just leave.
yeah, hey, I'm gonna be, I'm going just to go visit my family, making up a lie, you know? You wouldn't even go
Yeah,
to that extent to do that. So yeah.
right. Yeah, so that's all. There's a lot to like, a lot of information to keep in mind, but that definitely was something that stood out. Is that she was doing a lot of work to just disappear.
Yes.
Like it didn't make sense. So at approximately 7 o'clock in Woodsville, New Hampshire, a woman hears a loud noise outside of her home. And so she looks out the window and she sees a car up against the snowbank. And this is right on Route 112. So at 7:27, she calls 911 to report the accident and says that there's a car pointing west on the eastbound side of the road. So I'm assuming when the car hit, it probably spun and it was facing the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So then she also states that she saw a man inside the car smoking a cigarette. Then later, she claims that he wasn't smoking a cigarette, that it appeared to be a red glowing light inside the car. Maybe somebody was talking on a cell phone. So, and if you can look at, you can Google, there's pictures of everything. But if you look up the road, you got to remember there was like a lot of snow, feet and feet of snow, but it was dark. It's poorly lit. and there's 3 homes that kind of sit around where this accident happened. So there were 3 different families that kind of saw this accident from a different perspective, but all could see like what had happened
Yeah, from their window or
from their window. Yeah. So right after that, a school bus comes by, and this is his name's Butch Atwood, and he lives in one of those 3 homes that is close to the crash site. So he drives by and he stops, and she's there at this time, and he talks to her and he asks her if she's okay, if she needs help, and he says, I'm gonna call the cops to help you. And in one of the reports, it says that she pleaded with him not to call the cops.
Yeah, it's like, no, she already called AAA and
AAA.
she's fine.
And so he knew that at that particular stretch of road, I think it's actually like a 12-mile stretch of road, there's no cell reception. So he knew that there was no way that she could have called AAA.
Yeah.
So he goes back to his house and he calls 911. And so to me, that right there is a little weird, because if this is, let's say, an abduction and you crashed your car and somebody offers to call the police, why would you say no?
Well, at this point, this is my theory, is because she bought all that alcohol. There was some alcohol that was found mixed in one of her soda
Right.
drinks.
Right.
Thinking she's drinking again, maybe the second time, because she had crashed her father's car a few days ago,
Right.
coming from a party. And that maybe please don't call, because she knows that she would not pass the field sobriety test because she did a solo accident. She just, she got
Right.
in the accident. And so maybe she was trying to figure out herself by herself what she was going to do. But my point is, yeah,
and
why
she was
would you?
intoxicated too. She was intoxicated because he also says that she had to hold on to something to stand up, that she
Okay.
was kind of like unstable on her feet. So I mean, yeah, I guess that could, maybe she's not like in her right mind and not thinking.
Yeah.
I would just be
She's
thinking it's
panicking.
freezing cold.
I don't know where I'm at.
I have no cell reception.
Yeah.
What am I gonna do? Like,
How
what do
long
you
am I going to be out here tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, her car wouldn't run, so she couldn't even go in her car and turn the heater on or anything. Because number one, her car's like trashed.
Yeah.
But in this accident, both of her airbags deployed, and then the radiator like was pushed up against the fan. So like the car was totaled.
Yeah.
So it just, yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe if she was intoxicated, I guess that would play a big part on the decisions she made. So so then we have another local resident claim that she was driving home from work at 7:37 and she saw a police vehicle parked head on, going like head to head with Maura's car. She pulled over briefly, but she said that she didn't see anyone in or around the vehicle. So this is where the timeline kind of gets a little funky, because at 7:43 is when the bus driver claims that he went and called 911.
Okay.
But and he talked to her. But at 7:37 is when this other woman says that she drove by and nobody was there and the police car was already there.
But a neighbor did call the cop 911 at 7:27 to report the accident. So
Right.
somebody had already called the cops before the bus driver got there. So this cop who arrived on scene at 7:37 before the bus driver called at 7:43 might have been in response to the 7:27 p.m. call.
Right. So it was
But
in
why didn't
that
she see
small,
anybody?
yes, it was that small window of time where something happened. Like they
Yes,
can literally narrow it down to a matter of minutes that
because
something happened.
at 7:46 another police officer arrived and said nobody was on the scene.
Mhm.
The car was there. So who was that police SUV? Who was in it? Who was there? What is there a report made by that officer? Like,
So we'll get into that because that is like that kind of is like a huge thing in this series that that we watched.
yes,
It was like a big mystery at first, and so it gets kind of confusing, but I don't know because the woman who drove by on her way home from work, she knows exactly how long it took her until she got to the other side of where she actually gets cell service. So she was able to pinpoint pretty much exactly when she drove by because
yes.
she made a call right before she loses cell service, and then she made a call as soon as she got her cell service back. So she knows like that time frame. So um it's it's I don't know. There's so many theories. Um but in the car there was inside her car was an empty beer bottle, a damaged box of wine in the back seat, her AAA card, the blank accident forms that she had picked up, CDs, makeup, gloves, jewelry, driving directions that she had map quested earlier to Vermont, her favorite stuffed animal, and a book called Not Without Pearl, which is about climbing the White Mountains in New Hampshire.
And I just want to say for those young folks out there, MapQuest was something that we went on prior
Right? Yeah.
on the internet before we had actual driving directions on our
Yes.
phones, where we typed in
Yes.
directions and we had to print out the pages of where we were going, and we literally
Yes.
had to read them. And so much better than a Thomas guide, but that's a whole other episode for you guys
Oh,
on what
yeah.
is a Thomas guide and how to use one. But
That's way
anyway,
back.
yeah.
That's way back. Um, and then her debit cards and her credit cards and her cell phone to this day have never been used since then. So there's been no activity on any of that. So when they traced the vehicle back to her, they initially treated it as a missing persons case, thinking that she voluntarily went missing because and I understand that when you like basically I can just get up and leave and I don't have to tell anybody.
Yeah. It's not
No
illegal.
matter how out of the ordinary it is and how all of my friends and family would be like, she would never do that. She would tell somebody. If you tell the cops that, they're going to say she's a grown ass woman and she can leave and not tell anybody.
Yeah.
And so I don't, I mean, on cases like this, it's really shitty because you kind of lose a lot of time because of this, you're just sitting around like, oh, okay, well, she's out doing her thing, but is she?
Yeah.
But is she really?
There's a lot of missed opportunities in finding evidence and following trails, because maybe if she was picked up or if there was a trail or walking through the snow, something that they could have followed, but they kind of dismissed it early on, thinking she just left on her own.
And I know that, sometimes people do that for attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get a bunch of services that are being used, and when you're just trying to create a scene and get attention, and nothing's really wrong. So I get that that's a hard call to make. But when you look back at a case like this, it's kind of like, and the cops did actually search and do things in before a 24-hour period, before any of this, went into her actually like being treated a missing persons case. But like, just as a parent, could you imagine your kid goes missing?
Yeah.
You're
No.
just like that's it. Like, we're just gonna like look in our car and no sign of foul play. Like, we're just gonna move on. Like, okay, like, we're done.
You found directions, so therefore she's safe.
She was going somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a slippery slope when it comes to stuff like that. And unfortunately, these things happen. So in 2009, 5 years later, Maura's case was given to the New Hampshire cold case division, and they started handling it as a suspicious missing persons case. So 5 years later
Is when they barely started deciding, okay, this might be a little suspicious. We haven't heard from her in 5 years, so maybe now we might look into it.
yeah. So there have been a lot of theories, like we said. And so the
A
first
lot
one that
had to do with the blog, right? There was a like
yeah. And that's the first thing that I kind of want to touch on is, now I'm just going to preface this whole before we even talk about it. This is just what the series was about. This is not our belief, or there's so much information.
there's
I'm
a
curious
lot
to know what other people do. I put up a poll on YouTube, and 100% of the people say that they believe she was abducted.
yeah.
Not one person said, I believe that she went off on her own.
Yeah, and I don't believe the family had anything to do with it.
I don't either.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when these things first happen, we kind of go with a lot of theories and a lot of guessing, and we say things, and other people grab what maybe some podcasters, newscasters, whoever's broadcasting, they take this information and they run with it as if it was
Yes.
truth and it was fact. And I think this is what happened in this case, and it kind of muddied the water for the case.
Exactly. No, exactly. So there's a man named James Renner, and he's the one that had this blog. And he also wrote a book that I'm gonna read it. I have yet to read it, but it's called True Crime Addict: How I Lost Myself in the Mystery and the Mysterious Disappearance of Maura Murray. So do you want to talk about
On his, oh yeah.
Yeah.
So he started a blog about the case, and he's the one where it wasn't only his theories. I don't want to say all the theories were his. He opened it up, kind of like what we do, where we say, hey, what do you guys think?
Yeah.
And a ton of theories came out from it, but he kind of took a few of them and ran with them as if they were fact. And he still, to this day, when gets interviewed by podcasters, and he got interviewed by the couple of podcasters that Gina had mentioned earlier, and he was also interviewed by the girl who was doing this documentary on this show, and he literally speaks about a couple of his theories, and one of them being that Fred Murray had something to do with his daughter's disappearance, or was the reason behind his daughter's disappearance, and the men in her life. So meaning her boyfriend at the time, because her boyfriend was supposedly a womanizer and flirted a lot and cheated and had broken up with her, and her dad, who was kind of a hard ass.
Mhm.
The family, the two girls, there were two sisters. Well, there's actually, she had two sisters and a brother, or a brother or two, right? But brother.
A half brother or step brother, yeah.
But apparently the dad was into sports and running, and he got his daughters into running, and he was kind of like a hard ass on him. This is going from James Renner's point of view and story. But when the sisters and the family members were interviewed, they said yes, he was very involved, but they seemed to admire their dad. They seemed to
Yes.
love their dad. He was very involved with them growing up, and they had a lot of respect for him, and they never wanted to disappoint him. But that's
Right.
because they had a lot of respect for him. It wasn't due to fear. And that's my opinion, right? Like, I know that other
Right.
people have an opinion, but to me, it wasn't because of fear.
Yeah.
But he wanted, when James Renner started this blog, he started opening up these theories and he started running with them, and it got to the family, and the family despised him. They didn't want to have
Yeah.
anything to do with them. So when James Renner reached out to the family to interview him after all this, which maybe he should have started from the beginning, talking to the family first, and then
Yes.
maybe would have been more successful, I would think. But after he had all these theories going and these people going, he tried to reach out to the family. The family absolutely did not want to be interviewed by him. Fred Murray actually did not want to have anything to do with them at all.
No.
And so James Renner's like, I don't understand. A guy who has his daughter missing, why would he not want to talk to as many people as he can and get the word out there? And it wasn't because he didn't want the word out there, because he was going on the news. He was talking about it. He didn't want to talk to this particular person.
Yeah, because he knew which direction it was going to go.
He did. He knew that it was going to go in the direction where it's blaming him. And it even got to the point where it was alluded that the father sexually molested his daughters.
Right.
It wasn't that it was specifically said, but it was alluded to the fact that they may
Yes.
have been sexually abused by their father. The dad was floored from this information because, one, he'd never read the book.
Right.
But he actually was floored that this was actually insinuated. He was taken aback by it. He was insulted by it. He absolutely denies these allegations. The family's never come out and said that this is the case either. They have nothing but respect for their dad. I didn't get the impression that they were either, when they were being
No, and the dad made a comment that really kind of hit me too when he's being interviewed by Maggie and Art, and they're asking him, they actually tell him, what are your feelings about these allegations? And he said, this is why I try to stay out of, people blasting this case everywhere, because then all these theories come up, and now not only am I trying to find my missing daughter, but now I'm having to defend myself
Yes.
against all of these allegations that people are just creating on their own, with all of these asinine theories that people are coming up with because they want answers. But now I have to sit here and take time away from searching for my daughter to defend myself. And then they get to be the judge of if I'm guilty or not. And
Yeah.
they know nothing.
And I think that's what's kept him out of the spotlight. And it kind of, they were like, oh, well, he hasn't been interviewed in 5 years.
That's
He hasn't
why.
wanted to be, but that's exactly why he hasn't. And he doesn't want to be on social media because it's just the rumor mill. It goes wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but the thing was that took me by surprise too, is that they talk about him not being interviewed, but it's funny because he does attack the police investigation because of their initial decision that, she left on her own, she wasn't missing, she wasn't abducted, but also for the fact that, 5 years later, even 20 years later, we come to find out that the sister who had one of the last phone calls with Maura was never interviewed by the police.
Mm-hmm.
She was never asked, hey, what did you guys talk about? Because they'll get, and I'm sure Gina will get into it, but there was a particular phone call where she gets really upset and she talks about it with a few people before her disappearance, and she's very upset about this last phone call with one of her sisters, and that sister never being interviewed about that phone call.
Yeah,
Strange.
it is. I think that, and we'll go into this too, but um I think that Fred, the father, thinks that the police made a lot of mistakes, and so there's a lot of covering up being done.
Yes.
And we find that in a lot of cases that we look at, is that early on in these cases is when they should really be investigating certain things, and they drop the ball a lot of times
Yeah.
early on, and you can't go back. Like we've seen on many other cases where they destroy the crime scene. They let too many people in. They, and I'll go back again to the Idaho house.
Yes.
House is gone.
Now.
And, destroying evidence and stuff like that. And I think that sometimes they move too quick on investigations, and things do, unfortunately get destroyed, get tampered with. There's too many people in on a crime scene. So I feel like there might have been some things that happened that her dad does not feel was done correctly.
Yeah.
And so
he was pretty vocal about it. And I think one of the things that, going back to this James Renner guy and some of the theories that he came out with, but he says that, the dad didn't give this formal interview until 5 years later. And when he did end up showing up, he came with his attorney. But again, I
yes,
go back to, he's trying to defend himself at the same time.
because he feels like I need to be protected.
I'm being attacked. I'm being
Yes,
accused.
and he was smart. He was
Yeah.
absolutely smart to do what he did.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You bring an attorney does not necessarily mean you're guilty. You're just protecting yourself with the information you're giving.
Yeah,
Because again, people can twist your words and turn them around, and you want somebody else there to show that some of the things that maybe they might say that you said weren't said.
exactly.
So one of his biggest theories, this James Renner, is that Maura ran away from the men in her life to start a new life somewhere else. And he claims that he's come very close to finding her, that he actually tracked her down in a small place, small town in Canada. He thinks that she did get into a car with someone she knew. The reason behind that is because there were those witnesses in the houses around there. There was such a small window of time where she got away with no one seeing her. He's saying that, when somebody pulls up, like the bus driver, and says, "Hey, do you need a ride?" She doesn't get in the car with them, but why would she get in a car with a stranger if the next car came by?
Yep.
Which, the way he puts it, it makes sense. But to
It
me,
does.
maybe she didn't trust the way the bus driver looked and said no thank you, but trusted the next guy who came along and bad decision and got in the car. Who knows the reason behind it? Or like you said, she was drinking, wasn't in her right mind, and then by the
Right.
time she waited a few more minutes thinking, oh, that was stupid, I probably need to get in the car. But I understand his point of view, where he says, when you talk to somebody about what's happening, if they don't already know what's happening, the conversation's pretty quick. If they don't know what's happening, the conversation would be a little bit longer. Hey, you need a ride? What's going on? What happened? It would be a lot quicker than just pulling up and you jumping in the car with them. So,
Right.
yeah. So, and there's another theory out there that she could have gotten in a car with someone she vaguely knew, like maybe somebody she had
Right.
just met. There's when the investigators of this documentary were doing the retracing of her steps, they took the drive out there. She took an hour longer. So they're thinking maybe she stopped at a diner, somewhere to eat, to get gas. Maybe she saw somebody there, briefly spoke with them. Down the line, she gets in this accident. They're pulling up behind. She kind of is familiar with them. Maybe they were in the same diner with her, in the same bar, whatever the reason that she might have known them.
Right.
So another thing is that the reason why he believes that she took off to start a new life somewhere was that in her dorm room, she had packed all her stuff up in boxes. And there
And
was a
that was kind of odd to me too.
yes. But and there was a printed email from her boyfriend Bill on one of the boxes saying that he had cheated on her and was leaving her. So they're saying, wait a second, maybe that's why she wanted to take off. After Maura's disappearance, though, Bill says that they had a great relationship and did have plans to get married. And all of Maura's friends said that, but let me go back because to this relationship, because he's saying everything's great, but all the friends are saying kind of toxic. He,
Yeah.
like he said earlier, he was a womanizer, he was cheating. The sister didn't really trust him too much. But we go back to another I want to say theory or another guess as to why all her room was all packed and her stuff was all still in boxes, is that she had never unpacked in the first place. Because
Right.
it was the start of the semester. This is in February, the beginning of February, remember. So the winter semester starts after vacation, right? It starts around January. I know my son started school around January 29th. So that she had just moved in and the boxes were never unpacked. Not that they were packed, but they were never unpacked. So she had no plans on going anywhere.
Yeah.
So it depends on how you want to look at it. So,
And they kind of debunk everything, most things that James Renner has written about in his book or that he claims happened.
yeah.
He claims to have really, really gone and searched and done a lot of investigation on this case, but they kind of go a little deeper and go deeper into his investigation and tear everything apart that he's looked into.
Yeah, I think you asked the question, and I know we brought it up before, but are you putting the evidence to fit your narrative?
Exactly.
Or are you really searching for the truth?
Yeah, it seems like he finds one thing and then just runs with it. And another one of his theories is that he says that Maura was pregnant
Yes.
with Bill's child, and that she didn't want to have anything to do with Bill because, again, she found this note or this email that he had been cheating on her. And that he also said that there were searches done on her computer about the effects of drinking while pregnant. You later find out that she was in nursing school, and he interviews a classmate of hers, and that was basically like their vocabulary work for that week. That was their assignment, and that's why she would have been searching that.
Yes.
Not because so again, like you said, like he's taking this and making it fit his narrative.
Yes.
And so I think that, he says, oh, I think that she was running from her dad, running from Bill, her boyfriend. And she got into some trouble. She had a little bit of a kerfuffle.
Wait a second. What was that word? Kerfuffle?
Kerfuffle. So we talked about earlier how she was at West Point and ended up at University of Massachusetts. So while she was at West Point, she was caught stealing from Fort Knox, and it sounds crazy, like stealing from Fort Knox. It sounds like she should be locked up in prison for the rest of her life.
They
But
kept saying that, like, oh, she stole from Fort Knox. I'm like, how the world does she get
how did she get in there?
from Fort Knox? I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Like, what does she do? It's so funny how they kind of portray, like, led
They
you
do.
to believe. Yeah.
They build it all up, and then basically what she was doing is that she was using stolen credit cards to purchase things food, for example. She was ordering pizza. She would order it. She would go down, sign for the bill. I believe that's how they caught her, is signing for it. And so the judge told her that if she could stay out of trouble for 3 months, that he would take it off of her record, that it wouldn't show. Then it was 2 months later when she borrowed her dad's car and crashed his car.
And then also though, with the Fort Knox, it was that they were on a field trip. I just want to clarify this. She didn't steal from, they were on a field trip.
Yeah.
And technically, yeah, she did, but they were in a gift shop. You know, when you go
Yeah,
visit like a museum and you go to the gift shop and she
Yeah.
had stole like two little like items from the gift shop and they had pulled her aside
Yes.
for stealing that.
Yeah,
And
she
so,
wasn't walking
yeah,
out with like the safe strapped to her back or
the
anything.
gold blocks
No,
walking out in her pocket. No, she
no,
wasn't doing that.
no. So I think that he, again, like, kind of embellished a lot of these things to make it sound worse than it was, to make her sound like she was doing far worse things than she was doing.
Yes.
And, she was 21 years old. At this time when this was happening, she was probably 19 or 20. Kids get into trouble, I mean, it happens. And so I don't think that this really has or plays a huge part in the reason that she disappeared or was murdered or ran away or whatever the case may be. I don't think that any of this is. Again, I think it's him kind of making this
Yeah.
fit what he wants it to be. So he claims that, like you said, that she's been seen in Canada, and he actually goes to Canada, and she's seen in like a record store. So these two people, this Maggie and Art, the people that are doing this show, they go there, they talk to the woman, and basically this woman can't identify her after being given all these pictures. The woman can't identify her.
Initially she said, yeah, I saw them there. It was her. But when they finally do like the rendering of what when they finally did the rendering of what she would look like or something like,
Yeah.
wait a second. No, this is nothing like who came into my
Yeah. Right. So going back to the phone call that happened, this phone call happened with her sister Kathleen about 3 days prior to Maura missing. And so her sister had gone through rehab for drugs and alcohol, and she had called and was talking to Maura at work, and her supervisor saw Maura's supervisor saw her and said that she was like falling apart, crying, and was just so beside herself that she didn't even have words to speak. Like, she couldn't even explain to her what was happening. So apparently we later find out that the reason behind this phone call was that her sister Kathleen had told her, I've started drinking again. I've started, I don't know, using drugs or whatever. And so I think it just so happened that this was 3 days prior to her missing. I don't think that this had any connection to her missing. I don't see any ties to this at all.
No.
But I don't, again, I think that it's this guy kind of making these things fit his narrative. And if you guys haven't seen this show, please go watch it. It's long. It's 6 episodes, but it's very, very good.
Yeah.
And maybe you will catch things that we didn't catch because, like I said, it's long and there's so much information. But if if you guys catch something else, let us know. These are just, again, our personal opinions, nothing against anybody.
And it's not even our opinion. It's like just basically we're reiterating what was said on this show and not
Right.
really forming too
Yeah.
much of a judgment of it. I mean, I guess we're saying we don't believe that she took off on her own.
No, I don't. I don't believe that she did.
No.
I feel like if somebody is going to go as far as to completely relocate their life, you've got to have more than $280. And you're
Yeah.
not going to spend 40 of it on alcohol.
Yeah.
Um, she was smart. She was a smart girl. I don't think that would be a choice that she would make. I don't think she would have had a problem finding a job, but I without a car, without a job, and $200, I don't think that she's just gonna up and disappear. And I don't think she's in Canada or anywhere living her life. I really don't.
Not at all.
Um, so they go on and they they just kind of go through some other things about they also do like a search. They bring dogs in because there's a big question about what was searched, how quickly it was searched, why they waited as long as they did to search. Um and they bring in search dogs of their own. I don't think that she was ever in those woods right there. I know that there was a theory that maybe she was running away and she was there in the woods watching all of this happen.
But I think when they brought in the search dogs, though, the search dogs followed her scent up into the middle of the street.
Right.
Really, essentially, where she would get into a
Where she
car.
would have been picked up.
Yeah, so it never went into the forest or anything.
And
I know.
also they said that her body would have been frozen from
Yeah,
the temperature, and a frozen body does not emit an odor. So they would not have been able to, like, she wouldn't have smelled like anything.
yeah, but eventually spring will come around and bodies are found. And if it's just, there, and I know they've searched that area.
And another crazy thing to me too is there's no footprints.
Yeah, no, I do think she got into a car. Not sure if it was willingly or not, if she vaguely knew them or didn't know them. I know there's a theory about her hanging out, or there's a theory about some guys at a ski resort who didn't show up
Yes.
to work the next day. That maybe they could be involved, but they've never been charged, questioned. They don't even know. It's just like something out there saying, oh, there's these three guys, but there's no names, there's nothing, no one to interview them, so they weren't able to reach out to them. I know that Bill was looked at too, her ex-boyfriend, if he had something to do with her disappearance or anything, but he was thousands of miles away, just so everybody knows.
Yeah,
Because
1,700 miles away.
yeah, because he was doing his own, he was in the military,
Yeah.
doing his own boot camp or whatever. And so even when he disappeared, some of the people kind of questioned, like, well, he didn't really show up for the search, he wasn't there long. But just so you know, he did show up for the search. He wasn't
Yeah.
there long because he couldn't be there long, because then he would be considered AWOL from his military
Right.
position. So he was kind of, you know, some of the theories that James Renner came up with was kind of cleared to the wayside pretty quickly because they were just proven
Yeah.
wrong.
And they
So
were one of them too, what was the rag in her tailpipe.
Oh yeah, there was a theory about somebody putting a rag in her tailpipe at one of her stops, and
Right.
that's what caused her accident.
Yeah. But when her dad was questioned about that, he said, I'll tell you why, because I told her to do that. Because he was afraid that she was going to get pulled over and get in trouble with, because the way he described the car is like it smoked constantly. And so his thing was, if you put the rag in the tailpipe, that will stop that and you'll be able to get to your destination without, and he said, don't drive this car unless it's absolutely necessary, unless it's 1,000% absolutely necessary.
Because again,
And
like you said, like they were trying to get her a new car.
yes.
And was
And so I feel like, again, like that's another thing that if you just say that, like, yeah, why the hell would there be a rag in a tailpipe? That,
and
but
they tested out that that doesn't do anything to a vehicle. Like
and they
yeah,
tested it, and yeah,
it doesn't
absolutely.
do anything. If anything, if she went super fast with it, it would have spit out the
Yes,
rag. So the rags still being in there after driving that amount of time shows that she
exactly.
wasn't speeding. She wasn't driving
Nope,
recklessly or
nope.
fast because the rag was still in there. So
Mhm. Yep. Yeah. Um, so another another person that they interviewed, which I thought was really, it was really interesting, was a man who lives in the area. His name is Jim Smith. He's a former police officer, and he leads a group, and they meet every year on the anniversary of her disappearance. And he's kind of hell-bent on finding what has happened to her, where she could be. And so he talks with everybody, um but he was told that 2 weeks after her disappearance, he talked with Fred and said that he would help him to, work this whole case and try to figure out whatever. And then he says that he was told by the police that if he continued to interfere with the investigation, that he would be arrested.
so the former officer was told this.
Yes. And that was kind of odd to me, because I don't feel like what he was doing was interfering with their investigation, because even up until now, they have released very, very little information about this case. And their reason behind it is because, which I understand, but they say that if we put everything out there, then because there's even information that they won't tell Fred, and he actually sued them to get, like, to open up her case file so he could see the case files, and he lost. And it
Yeah.
went to the Supreme Court and he lost. But their thing is, it's still an open investigation, and they want things that, if somebody says that they don't want that information out there, they want that information to only be known by the person who maybe could have committed this crime. And I
Yeah.
get that. I understand that. But I feel like I feel like it's just a game now, basically.
Yeah.
They're holding everything from him.
Yeah, I feel like some of the information that he's asking for could be released and let him know, because it's not necessarily because he doesn't necessarily want it to put it out there in the public. He just wants to know for his own peace of mind they're doing everything out there they can to find where his daughter is, where she could possibly be. And he feels like if some of that is shared, it might help with the case maybe. And But I
Yeah.
don't think he wants it all out there either. I think a lot of it's just for his own personal peace of
Yeah.
mind that
Yes.
things are being done because he feels like not enough's being done to find his daughter. That
Right.
it's kind of like, okay, well, she's missing or she's gone off on her own. Maybe he's just feeling like they still think she just took off on her own and they're really not looking. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like, you know, he feels like, he said that he feels like the police are hiding things because of their lack of proper performance.
Yeah.
And so that's when they get into like the jurisdiction, and there was another police officer that was on the scene, and they claim that at first he didn't report that he was on the scene because he was from a different jurisdiction, but we later find out he did do a report. So, you know, he was there. He asked the officer there, "Do you need help?" He said no. It was very, very early on in the investigation, or in the, like, right when the crash had happened, and he said, "No, we're just, you know, we're looking for this person that this car belongs to." Um, I think that her dad is convinced that she did not commit suicide. That's another theory, is
Yeah.
that she committed suicide. And her dad is definitely convinced. But there were, along with those other things listed, there were sleeping pills found in her car. There were 5 boxes, but 1 box was empty. And so their, you know, their thing is, did she take those and then drink all that alcohol and then overdose, basically?
Yeah.
So,
Maybe kind of stumbled off into the woods on her own.
right.
Yeah.
Which, again, I think if that happened, she would have been found by now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A body would have found. I definitely think that, yeah, that she was taken away from there either on her own or not on her own. But
Right. Right. Um, so this John guy, who's considered like the family investigator, he says when they ask him about the people in this small neighborhood area, town, whatever, um, they ask him, and he says that there's some crazy people in this area, in this town. There's people that just basically stay in their house all the time and don't ever go out. And there's a lot of weird or odd things that go on in this town that a lot of people aren't made aware of, which basically to me alludes to the fact that somebody from this town could have done it.
yeah.
Um, so there's also talks of it being a serial killer.
Yeah. Another girl had gone missing from the same university not too long before.
3 or 4 weeks after Maura went missing, a girl named Brianna Maitland went missing.
Oh, it
90
was
miles.
after. I thought it
Yeah.
was prior. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. See, look
Um,
at what we said about catching something that the other person might have not have caught.
yeah, she went missing March 19th.
Okay.
Yeah, so she went missing March 19th. Um,
Have they
and
found her?
her story is crazy. So,
That's a whole other episode then.
yeah, basically she was just driving home. Her car was found backed into a farmhouse. Um, the door to her car was open and her paycheck was on the front seat. She's nowhere to be found. Um, and it was her car was backed into this farmhouse, like hard enough to put a hole into the wall. But they say that she was heavily involved in like the drug scene and stuff like that. Her family says no, she wasn't, but apparently she was, and they think that that is kind of how this whole thing happened, that it could have been like a drug deal gone bad or whatever. But they don't believe that the two cases are connected. But her story is, it's very, very interesting to me. Just when people just disappear like that, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
It doesn't. Yeah.
It's so the last theory that they talk about is how they refer to this house as an A-frame house, which is, an A-frame house basically. Like, um and there's two brothers that live there, and this house is only about a mile away from where Maura crashed her car. And so I guess around town, rumors have been circulating that these two brothers, or one of the brothers, was the person who murdered her, took her back to this house and and killed her basically. And the one brother that they're saying is, again, he's also involved in the drug scene. And so in this house they found blood in a closet that was on, and they show this, it kind of looks like the wood behind me. It's all like, it's all wood, like a cabin like. But they also say that there was a knife found in a glove compartment that had blood on it. It was turned into the police department. The police department gave it back. Then they turned it back into the police department because this knife was given to Fred, Maura's dad. The second time he gave it to the police, they kept it, but nothing was done with it. And there have been no talks, anything that's happened to, like, if it was DNA tested, nothing. I think those are a lot of the things that he may be referring to also,
Things
of
completed by the police department or looked
exactly.
into thoroughly. Yeah.
Yeah. So they end up, basically, they go back to this house a few times. There's a portion of the wall in the closet that's removed. It contains human blood. They do like a DNA test on it. In the show, they lead you to believe, like, you're gripping the edge of your seat. You think like, oh my God, like, you're gonna, this is it. They're gonna find it. You find out that it's not animal blood, it's human blood, and they're basically can't pull DNA from it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, I feel like and at the end of the show, they kind of break down, like, there's 5 ways that she could have died. She could have been murdered. She could have ran away. She could have been lost in the woods.
Drug overdose.
A drug, like all these different things. And they kind of rule out every single one except a murder. Like,
Well, yeah, I mean, she's definitely, I really think she's definitely not here. They even went so far as to bring in a psychic or a medium to kind of
right.
walk you through it, but that was almost kind of, let's fill some time and space. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like that stuff
necessary.
it's so controversial stuff,
Yeah.
like, too, that I feel like, they called her in. They said, oh, the lady said, oh, she's by a bridge. So they went to all these bridges in the area. She's like, oh no, I'm not feeling it here. Go to the next bridge. Like, oh, I'm not feeling it here. I'm not,
Yeah.
um,
But
so,
she was saying, like, definitely she's murdered,
yeah,
but
she's not here.
but I mean, I do believe that she's no longer with us. I think they would have
Right.
found her, she would have came out again, like you said earlier in the show. Her mother died 5 years later on her birthday from cancer. Her mother ended up passing away. If she was still here, I really do truly believe, and they even did say this, that a lot of times when they're that young, there's nothing that'll keep them away from their parents' funeral
Mhm.
at that point. Because they were asking, like, do you think somebody, you know, that young or whatever would stay away from their mother passing away? And no, really, they, especially at her age of being
Right.
so young, she would have pushed those differences aside and would have come
Of
to
course.
her mother's funeral. Um, I just don't think, I think the day that she drove, the day she got in the accident is the day, may not necessarily be the day she died, but it's the day that she was taken away. Um,
Yes.
and something terrible happened to her, unfortunately. It's just about trying to find her body at this point and trying to locate her, and just having certain people step forward who might have seen her. I know that they alluded to the fact that some of her friends might know more than they really than what they're saying, but their theories on that, it's just so far-fetched too, because they're kind of like, oh,
Oh yeah.
they helped her get away. They're not saying anything because they helped her get away from her boyfriend or from her dad, which I don't think that's the case either, but
No, I
that's my
I don't
personal opinion.
no, and I don't. I think it sounds good. It sounds like a reason, but when you really tear everything apart, I don't feel like she was running from anybody. I don't feel like she had a reason. She was 21 years old. If she was gonna run from her dad, she'd have ran before.
I think she was going back. She probably had to clear her head. She just found out her boyfriend was cheating on her. She's like,
Yes.
screw this. I'm going up to our family's cabin where that was where I remember having a good time when I was a child. I love hiking
Yeah.
up there. I like the outdoors. She gets in this accident. And they were saying, like, oh, there's so few cars that pass through this area. The chances of her running into somebody who is gonna murder her is very slim. I'm sorry, I don't think so.
No,
I think um,
not at all.
I don't
That's where things
I
happen.
think that's
That's where people go to murder people is because there's not a lot of people
there's
there.
a lot of people you
I
don't
mean, my God, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure that one out. Like,
yeah, I just think at the wrong place at the wrong time, and
yeah,
unfortunately we came across a bad person, whether
people that do those things hide out in those places and wait for people to go by that are alone, knowing there's no cell reception, so they can't make a phone call. Like,
yeah. Or it
no,
could be
that's where those things happen.
the closest theory I think it might be too
So
is the two brothers live in
I
the
just really think that, and again, that's my opinion. I think she definitely was abducted. I think she was, unfortunately, she's no longer here.
yeah.
And I think it might just be another case of we might not ever know.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think the closest thing to their theory that I think could be possibly true is the two brothers who lived in the home with the drugs. And, if they were
For
young
sure.
looking and they came by because they lived in the area and they picked her up, something might have happened against her will because they're on
Yeah.
drugs. I think that's the closest thing that we can have to it, but other than it just being a stranger abduction. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, because I mean it is a little odd as far as, finding blood in a closet, and
yeah.
yeah, I think that's definitely a bit weird.
No,
Um,
but this is
but
definitely an episode that people need to check out. There's so much more to it. There's so many more theories. I mean, we could have covered it's just too hard to cover every single one. I mean, it took them 6, 7 hours to cover it. So
and her sister, one of her sisters, Julie, um, it was a guest on a podcast in November. Um, it was a two-part series and it was called hold on. It's called Weird True Crime, I believe. And her sister was also on True Crime Garage.
oh, okay.
Yeah, it's called Weird True Crime, and I believe the girls that do it are Gina and Amber.
Oh,
And
cool.
she was just Julie was just on that podcast in November, and then she was also interviewed by True Crime Garage in 2020. So she's kind of made her way around the podcast circuit also. And so I wanna listen to the most recent one, because she does in the second episode talk about a lot of things that are out there that are not true.
Awesome. Yeah, no, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
So, all right. Well, thank you for tuning in for another week, and please let us know what you think about this case. I feel like I'm very passionate about this case, and I just I don't know. I just feel like when things happen like this and they just go missing, it's just it baffles me. I don't understand how somebody just disappears like that. No body found, no like
yes.
um but obviously, it happens. So please let us know, comment and everything, and let us know your thoughts on this case and what you think happened. If there's any other good documentaries out there, let me know. Anything that you guys have listened to or watched or read or whatever. So,
For us to cover.
yeah.
Awesome. Well,
All
thank you.
right. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.